Recently, while trekking near Pikey Peak in Nepal last November, I met a couple who were living in Berlin. She was German and he was from Chile. So between the three of us, we shared German, English, and Spanish. And yet, after a few minutes, something interesting happened. We naturally drifted into Spanish and stayed there for hours in conversation. No one suggested it. No one decided it consciously. So there in the Himalayas, thousands of kilometers from Spain or Latin America, something suddenly became very clear to me. This is why Spanish never falls from number 2 among the list of languages most studied by foreigners. That moment stayed with me for another reason, because for me, Spanish just isn't a foreign language. It's my second language from childhood. I grew up in South Florida at a time when many Cubans in the 1950s and 1960s were fleeing the revolution. We called them boat people because they often came in small boats to Key West. And they were settling in the Miami, Hialeah, Fort Lauderdale area.
Miami in the 1970s was unlike anywhere else in America. Art Deco hotels were fading in the sun. The Cuban community grew explosively. The cocaine trade transformed the city's skyline, and retirees shared the beach with a new generation. Elderly Jewish retirees from New York filled the Art Deco hotels of South Beach. The pace was slow. The city felt like it was living in the past. By the end of the 1970s, everything had changed. The Cuban exile community had transformed Miami into a bilingual, bicultural city.
It was something you heard, used, and lived in neighborhoods, stores, conversations, and friendships. At 18, I took that language with me to Colombia, where I studied at Universidad de los Andes in Bogota. There, Spanish wasn't just a tool for daily life. It became the language of my ideas, the literature that I read, and my new linguistic and cultural identity. So actually I changed from a more Cuban identity, hablando muy rápido, speaking very quickly, to hablando mucho más despacio, speaking much more slowly and clearly as they do in Bogota. At the university, I mainly studied Latin American literature and some political science, and all the lectures were entirely in Spanish. At the same time, at various language institutes in Bogota, I began studying German, French, and Portuguese. And this part is important. I studied those languages through Spanish, not through English. That turned out to be incredibly useful. First, it deepened my understanding of Spanish grammar and Spanish itself. The teachers constantly compared the grammar of French, German, and Portuguese to that of Spanish. Verb systems, tense contrasts, mood, gender, word order, etc. So Spanish stopped being just something I spoke every day. It became something I felt and understood other people, the world, other languages through. And in the case of Portuguese, studying in Spanish mattered even more because learning Portuguese through Spanish helped me keep the two very similar languages, especially in the written form, separate. Spanish became my reference point, the language through which other languages made sense to me. So in a very real sense, my polyglot journey started in Spanish. That's why moments like the one in Nepal feel so natural to me, long before I ever thought about rankings or statistics. Spanish already taught me something important. Languages live in people, not in lists. But the lists are still interesting because they confirm what experience already shows. Let's look at the scale. Spanish is one of the largest languages in the world. Today, over 500 million people speak Spanish as a first language. Another 80 million plus speak it as a second language. Now, that's well over 580 million speakers worldwide, more than 500 million. Spanish is an official language in more than 20 countries. You have, of course, Spain, Mexico, Central America, most of South America, take away Brazil and the Guyana, Suriname, the Caribbean, and even places outside the Americas and Europe, in Africa, for example. And also Spanish speakers don't stay in one place. They travel around individually or move to various countries, often getting together as a group. Spanish has massive diaspora communities. In the United States alone, over 60 million people speak Spanish, making it the second most spoken language in the country. Large Spanish-speaking communities also exist across Europe outside of Spain. Spanish is also one of the most widely taught foreign languages in the world, consistently number 2. In the United States, Spanish accounts for the vast majority of foreign language study, often estimated at 70 to 80% of all language learners. That is an enormous percentage. In the European Union, Spanish is constantly among the top 2 or 3 foreign languages taught in secondary schools. Across Asia, Spanish is a major foreign language option at universities and language institutes, not because of colonial history besides the Philippines, but because of global usefulness. Spanish is supported both institutionally and informally. That is a rare combination. But numbers alone don't explain why Spanish stays so strong. What really explains it is travel. As I move through Asia, Central Asia, the Middle East, I constantly meet Spanish-speaking travelers from Spain, Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, Chile, etc. Many times, I don't even start off in English. I start off in Spanish. And sometimes they answer in Spanish, even though it's not their mother tongue. Often, that is the case with some Italians and French I have met. So I often hear couples or groups speaking Spanish as I walk through a tourist area or the mountains in China, etc. Spanish also offers something many global languages don't. It's very emotionally expressive, friendly, forgiving of accents, because there are so many accents in Spanish. I would even say much more than there are in English. And Spanish feels socially warm. People don't just use Spanish, they relax into it. That comfort matters more than prestige or predictions about what's going to be the next language due to economic development and career opportunities. If you compare Spanish with other languages in this series of the most studied languages, the pattern becomes clear. For example, we saw German was driven by institutions. Chinese was driven by economic predictions, the language of the future. And Japanese was driven by culture and reinforced by institutions. Korean was driven by people, not schools or institutions, just people interested in various aspects of Korean culture. Now, Spanish is driven by movement. It travels with people, not because anyone told people to learn it, but because it keeps making sense in real life. You would be surprised about how many Spanish speakers you'll meet as a backpacker or a casual traveler here in Asia. So Spanish has that quiet advantage. Spanish doesn't surge dramatically among students. It doesn't collapse. It just keeps working in classrooms, on hiking trails, in cafes, in hostels, in foreign cities, in conversations that weren't planned. And that's why decade after decade, Spanish never falls from the number 2 spot of the most popular languages studied around the world. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next video.
If you're passionate about languages and cultures, head over to polyglotdreams.com, where you'll find my memoir, A Life in 30 Languages. It's available in multiple languages, including dual language editions and versions with audio narration, perfect for learners who want to combine reading and listening for deeper study. In this memoir, I share my adventures in 99 countries to the date I wrote the book, along with insights on how to learn languages best, drawn from my own experiences and research as a professor of cross-cultural management. Whether you're a polyglot, a language learner, or simply curious about the world, it's a resource to inspire and inform. So don't forget to visit Polyglot Dreams, the link is in the description, to explore the memoir and expand your language horizon.